On this episode, we become AlmondWise as we join Ken Peelman from Monte, Vista Farming in Denair, California, as he discusses everything from almond production, USDA grading, water regulations, and the global demand for this tree nut crop. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville to discuss the U.S. weather patterns and how they're impacting the commodity markets today. Be sure to join us for the Innovation Expo on July 9th in Memphis, Tennessee. Reach out to your Helena representative to learn more.
Endangered Species Act requirements are changing, but you've got options. Adjuvants and DRAs can help keep your spray on target, reduce drift, and support compliance. That means more confidence in the field and fewer headaches when planning applications. Talk with your agronomist or retailer about what's right for your operation. Learn more at cpda.com/ESA Toolbox. CPDA, protecting the acre, growing the opportunity.
And welcome to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith, and joining us from the state of California is Ken Peelman. Ken, welcome to FieldLink.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Yeah, man. Well, great to have you join us. Ken, you've got quite the journey. You are the almond expert, or one of the many in the state of California. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do in the almond industry, Ken.
Well, that's the first time someone's ever referred to me as an expert, so I'll take the wins where I can. Yeah, I've been born and raised in Fresno County, out of Kerman. I'd be a fourth-generation farmer, Aggie. My grandparents, they started farming in California in the early 1900s, and my dad and uncle still farm some of the same ground today, which I take a lot of pride in that. Over 100 years later, we're still doing it. A graduate of Fresno State, majored in ag economics. While I was going to college, I started field checking for a crop protection company called Kerman Agri-Resources. Got my crop advisor license, my pest control advisor license in around 2008. Did that for about 3 or 4 years for Kerman Ag, and then actually went to work for Helena.
All right.
Out of their Kerman location. Was there for several years and then transferred up to the Modesto branch and spent about 7-8 years with Helena. And I was walking about 14,000 acres of almonds, walnuts, wine grapes, dairy rotation.
Excellent. And Ken, tell us who you work with today.
Yeah, so today in 2021, I had an opportunity to go to work for an almond processor company called Monte Vista Farming Company. So they are a huller, sheller, and processor. I'm sure we've got some listeners that don't know what a huller is or can't necessarily understand what we do as a processor, but essentially we take almonds from the field, get them cleaned up, get them in a box, get them sorted, sized, and get them marketed to everyone in the world.
So Ken, tell us a little bit about your business today.
Yeah, so fast forward to today, I'm Director of Grower Relations for an almond processor and huller. Our company's called Monte Vista Farming Company. We're out of Denair, California, where we take raw almond products from the field, do further processing, sorting, sizing, and then we'll get them marketed and into a carton and ship them domestically and into the export markets.
Wow. Exciting stuff. Ken, almond processing and the production of almonds is very much different. A lot of our listeners are very much, we have a wide range of listeners on the FieldLink podcast, but almonds are a little bit different. Could you walk our non-almond experts through the production process? There's a lot involved in the production of almonds.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I think I'll take it all the way back to developing an orchard, right? We're farming a perennial crop. It's not just plant, feed, irrigate, harvest, start over, or make a change, right? When we go into identifying how we want to redevelop, when we want to redevelop, or even a blank piece of ground, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that, soil type, water quality, irrigation district. Is it groundwater only? Do we receive surface water?
Yeah.
All those sorts of things, selecting the right rootstock to match the varieties, all those sorts of things. So once we make all those decisions and get a plan in place and get ground prepped and amended and executed on, we're going to be farming these things for about 3 or 4 years and getting them to grow before we see any production on them. Once they're producing, they've probably got about another 20 to 21 years of productive life before it's time to yank them out, grind them up, and start over.
Well, I was going to say, do you go back, you start over, do you go back to the same field or do you have some kind of a rotation in between?
A lot of guys will go back to the same field. We'll fumigate. We'll turn soil over. We'll do more amendments. Sometimes if a guy has the cash flow and availability to leave that sit idle, he might let it sit idle for a year, put in some alfalfa for 4 seasons. Guys will lease them to watermelon growers so they fumigate for you, cleansing your soil from any diseases or nematode that might be in there. But typically you want to get that orchard turned over and going again as quick as possible so you're not lacking cash flow on that piece of property for 4 seasons.
Right, yeah, because you're going back, waiting another 3 or 4 before you really see any revenue coming off it.
Yeah, and once you're producing, we're producing 3 products really. We make, we're making almonds. So what you think about when you're eating a bag of trail mix or just raw natural, or even your candied and smoked, but you've got the hull and then you've got the shell that encompass that kernel.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're growing this crop, you have 3 products that all are utilized. Hulls are sold as dairy feed as a byproduct, and the shells are sold to dairies as well as bedding to keep cows out of mud and dirt and things like that. So none of the crop is wasted.
That's awesome. I had no idea that you were moving the shells as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so marketing almonds, as you mentioned, it's going to be 3 or 4 years before a grower really starts to see his or her first crop. Once they do, how do they go to market with almonds? It's not kind of like we're used to in the corn, soybeans, cotton market, is it?
No, it's a little different. So the almond industry in California here, we have there's about 95 to 100 registered processors in the state. About 50 of them are actually really, truly processing and pushing product into the market. So most growers will process with a processor, and then that processor on their behalf will go take it to market, whether it's to the EU or India or Middle East or Japan or domestically. The processor will go through and we'll clean product, we'll size it, we'll sort it, we'll have the USDA grade it, which will tell you your net payable pounds versus inedibles, chipped and scratched, all those sorts of things. And then we line up the sales and the shipments. And in that process of processing, growers typically have 2 options on how they want to market their crop. One is called a call pool, where a grower is very interactive with deciding when to sell and how much to sell. And the other is typically referred to as a seasonal pool, where you're having your processor just manage all the sales for the year. You're selling your volume with many other growers' volumes throughout the crop year, and you're kind of catching the highs and lows and creating a nice solid return based on the averages of what the market does that year. And you're receiving progress payments throughout the season.
Okay, boy, there's quite a little different process than there. Okay, so things have changed. What's the market like today for almonds? It just seems like I'm seeing more and more on the shelves today than I have in the past as a kid growing up. Is that true? And what's the uptick looking like?
Yeah, so a lot has changed in the almond industry, and I think you can kind of break it into 3 buckets. One, like if you think back 10, 15 years ago, irrigation infrastructure has changed. How many growers used to flood irrigate. New orchards now, guys have converted flood irrigation to micro sprinklers or drip irrigation, more efficient with their water use. And that's also driven a big change in how we fertilize almonds, from big, heavy slugs 2-3 times a year to continuous feeding throughout the season. Every time we turn on water, you might be feeding a little bit of fertility to those trees, matching demand curves. So a lot of efficiencies have changed in the farming practices. The amount of acres planted in California. In 2010, we had about 740,000, 750,000 acres planted. This year, 2026, we're sitting at about 1.38 million acres of bearing acres in the state. So just a huge explosion. And the other thing is the market, the price for almonds. I've got some numbers here for you. Just some rough general ideas. In 2010, it was about $1.75 blended average. 2014, $3.60. 2019, $2.33, down to $1.60 in 2022, and now back up to about, I'd say 2025 crop, maybe around $2.50, $2.55. We still haven't finished selling everything, so we don't know exactly where our final average is going to be. So a little bit of a roller coaster in the last 10 to 15 years for almond growers.
Ken, what kind of drives that roller coaster? Is it domestic demand, or is there an international play here? Is it human consumption, just dietary changes, that sort of thing?
Definitely a market demand and supply availability play here. We had our largest crop on record in 2020, which what else happened in 2020? COVID. So while sales were still good, shipping logistics were a nightmare, which created a large carry-in into the next crop year. Now we had an oversupply situation with another strong crop in 21, and it took us a few seasons to get out of that heavy carry-in cycle. And now we've come back to some equilibrium on the supply side.
Are you seeing consumption going up at the consumer level, or different products being demanded? I mean, it still seems like the trajectory is in a good direction here.
Yeah, so in the export markets, things have been positive. We have some really mature, developed markets there in the EU. India's market has been maturing. They typically buy in-shell product only because there's a tariff on in-shell and a tariff on kernels. It's more favorable for them to buy it in-shell with the shell on it and then crack it out once it's over in India. But they've gone from, kind of selling in-shell in open air markets to having some more CPG type products, pre-packed, clear cellophane, zip top bottom, snack packs and things of that nature. So they're continuing to mature. Currently, the domestic market is actually lagging.
Really?
And growers and processors and other marketers, we haven't quite put our finger on the why. But a big part of it, in my opinion, is when you look at some of the product space, like almond milk, now you have oat milk, cashew milk. You've got some competition in there. Also, you look at inflation, you look at cost of fuel, cost of everything else for consumers going to the grocery store. Almonds is a luxury snack item. They might be putting their dollars towards milk, eggs, bread, meat, and those are some of the things that get cut out domestically.
Ken, how do almonds compare, just off the shelf? You said it's kind of a premium nut type product compared to other peanuts and other cashews, I would assume. Where does that live?
Well, no offense to the guys in the South, peanuts is not a nut; it's a legume.
There you go. Okay,
yeah,
for the people anyhow.
But you're exactly right. I mean, it's considered more of a luxury snack item, and when we see almond pricing on the retail side get too high, or we see economic distress and people's money's not stretched as far as it can go, instead of reaching for those almonds, they're reaching for a peanut or a potato chip or things like that instead.
And you touched on something earlier about almond milk. I mean, almond milk was the only non-dairy alternative, at least one of the primary ones, for such a long time. And now it seems like
for a very long time,
everything else is on the market today.
Yep.
What's the strategy there? Or is there a strategy to kind of capture that?
Yeah, the Almond Board of California does a great job for the almond growers out here. And they're a federal marketing order doing research, trying to do product innovation. And right now, that's one of their big focuses is product development, trying to get to more ingredient-based uses for almonds domestically to find other avenues in the domestic market to get these nuts used in other things, not just snacks.
Yeah, it's like any I guess commodity. We've got to evolve and look for bigger picture items, more value, right?
Correct.
Especially in the market. Okay, you touched on the international market. We talked a little bit about India. You touched on the EU. What's driving that international market, specifically around the EU?
Yeah, so the EU is a big market. For us at Monte Vista, the EU is probably one of our bigger regions that we ship to. We do a lot of business in Spain, Italy, Germany, believe it or not, Netherlands. The EU buys a lot of ingredient-based type products to blanch, to roast, to slice, to dice, blend into flour, make marzipan, things like that. And then they've been around for decades using almonds as ingredients. So huge market for us, huge market for the industry. And when you look at what California's done this year on shipments from the last position report that was put out in May, review in April, total shipments this year, export-wise, they're up 1.28%. So that's positive. It's continuing to go. On the other hand, domestic's down 14%. But overall, we're only off 2.7 in total. So that just shows how much of a driver exports are on the total handle of California almonds.
So EU for your operation, your farm at Monte Vista is EU's. They're one of the leaders. Who else would fall in number 2 or so?
Yeah, so the EU is probably our biggest region. India is our largest single country that we ship to. the Middle East, Dubai. We do stuff into Turkey, Pakistan, and we do quite a bit into Japan as well. Japan's a great premium market for us that they buy high quality, high spec, and they're willing to pay for it.
This is random, but where else are almonds grown around the world? I know California is known for it. Are other places?
Yeah, so California, we grow about 72 to 75% of the world's almonds. The other main growing regions are Australia, Spain, Portugal, and then you have some stuff in Iran as well, and some spots in the Middle East.
All right. So just a handful of locations, really.
Yeah, that Mediterranean climate, there's not a whole lot of spots in the world that are able to do it.
Interesting where these crops come from and where they're going. That's for sure. Okay, so as we're currently kind of in the season, you're right in the thick of it right now as we're recording this podcast at the end of May. What's going on? What's going on in the crop today in California and some of your customers and some of the operations that you're overseeing?
Yeah, so where we're at right now on the farming side, we farm about 5,000 acres of almonds. Some of that's custom management, some of that's owned properties. We're past bloom, we're past pollination, we're past rapid expansion and sizing, and we're just getting into the tail end of nut fill, where that, gelatin stage of that kernel is really starting to fill out. And just at the butt of that kernel is almost completely closed. So right now we're kind of continuing with our irrigation. I'm running my last shot to nitrogen this week. I'll continue to feed potassium and calcium through June and into July. And we're getting ready for a hull split. And that's kind of when the nut opens up and becomes susceptible for pest pressure, heavy pest pressure and damage to the kernel. And we're getting ready to gear up and time our hull split sprays properly with the proper material, prepping equipment for those practices. And then we start to ratchet off irrigation a little bit and get these things ready to shake and get harvest going.
Ken, there's a lot of steps in raising almonds, and I think a lot of our growers that are familiar with this process, I mean, you're touching that crop a lot throughout that growing season, aren't you?
Yeah, a lot of touches. Some years less touches than others, depending on weather during bloom with bloom sprays. We had 3 fungicide applications this year to where last year we got away with 1.5. So yeah, it's weather dependent a lot of the times, and what's pest pressure doing later in the season. Can you get away with 1 whole split spray, maybe 2? Sometimes you got to do 3, which could be fun on the budget when it's a yes, must go type of year.
Right. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the insect side of things. That fungicides are very important, especially as you're entering that stage right now. But let's talk about the bugs. What's the bug pressure like, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, so California's single biggest pest for almonds is navel orangeworm. It's also a pest in pistachios. It's a pest in pomegranates. It can be a pest in walnuts from time to time, not as common, but almonds and pistachios are the 2 biggest hosts and food sources for navel orangeworm. It typically has 3 full life cycles towards the tail end of the year, and those life cycles coincide right with harvest, so you're susceptible. So you got to protect for that. We deal with mite that can defoliate your orchard. We deal with ants. As you shake your almonds onto the orchard floor, if you got ants, they will chew up kernels and create insect inedibles or serious defect on your grade sheets, which you're losing crop at that point. So I'd say those are 3 of the biggest insects would be navel orangeworm, mite, and ants. But just recently we've had a new one pop up called Carpophilus beetle. UC Extension Office is doing a bunch of research and studies on it, trying to figure out the best practices to approach it and fight it.
Wow. And you touched on something, I think, again, our non-almond experts here, like myself, you've really got to manage those insects because part of the grading process is how that almond looks, correct?
Yeah, how that almond looks. So, when you submit a sample to the USDA, they're going to look at several things. They're going to look at your sheller run pounds, so your total pounds coming out of your huller. They're going to make a deduction for foreign material, so anything that's not an almond kernel. They'll make a deduction for moisture. Any moisture over 5% moisture, they're going to deduct pounds off of that. Then you get to your total meats, and from there you'll have a deduction on serious defects. So anything chewed up, any brown spot from a stink bug or a plant bug sting where they're taking their stylet, boring through the hull and shell while they're still soft and sucking out any sap or any of that jelly stage from the kernel, that creates a brown spot, and that's a defect on your grade. So typically, we love to see growers below 2%, and we're really excited when we got less than 1% inedible coming into the processor.
So, Ken, USDA grades almonds. Walk us through the grading process. How many grades are there? I'm just not familiar.
Yeah. So as product comes into the facility, we'll submit a 200-gram sample to the USDA inspector. They'll take that sample, a sample of that sample or multiple samples of that sample. They'll visually inspect it. They'll pull out any foreign material. They'll weigh that foreign material against the base weight. That's how they're getting the foreign material percentage. They'll take a moisture sample. Again, if it's over 5%, it's a deduction. So if you're at 6%, you're going to lose 1% of your shell run pounds off your marketable pounds. We call them net accessibles or good kernel weight. From there, they grade for serious defect, brown spot, insect damage, etc. Those pounds are now removed from your marketable pounds, and then you have your final net accessible.
Okay. Wow. Quite a process then to go through to get those graded, and glad we have them in place, right?
Yeah. So, when I've got growers that I receive their grades from the USDA that are stellar, I get to give high fives and call and tell them, hey, what'd you do right? And when I got rough ones, it's not always fun to deliver that news, but with my background doing crop advising, I can talk through what did you do? What was your timing? What was your product selection? And tie it to, okay, here's what it cost you. Here's what you could have spent, and here's what you would have earned, and tie that ROI together for them. So next year we can try to do better together.
Definitely a learning process, I'm sure, as we go through that coaching session, if you will.
Without a doubt.
Okay, Ken, managing almonds, even after you harvest, you're still not done, are you? You still need to manage those trees.
Oh, we could wish we were done as soon as the crop came off.
Unlike a corn combine, when you roll through, it's all over. You can, park the combine in the shed for the winter. You don't get to do that with.
Well, a lot of the corn and bean guys in those parts of the country, it gets too dang cold to plant anything else until springtime. So, I don't blame them for parking it and restoring tractors in the wintertime. I would be too.
But with your almond trees, it doesn't end.
No, absolutely not. No, once harvest is over, call it mid to late October to February is very busy. I mean, we've got post-harvest fertility and irrigation are critical. We have a very small window to restore the carbohydrate loss through the growing season before they go dormant and take their long winter nap, accumulate their chill hours before they wake up for bloom in the spring. So we got to get fertility on. Orchard floor maintenance. After you shake, you're sweeping nuts into the centers and you're grabbing dirt, you're creating a mound. We got to float that back out. We're taking our soil samples. We're doing our amendments. We're doing pre-emergent herbicides. We're doing a dormant spray. We're also pulling out trees that we lost during the season and we're replanting them. Mm-hmm. And it goes on and on and on, and it's nonstop. And then we get to deal with winter rains, muddy fields. You're out of the field for 2 weeks. You got a 10-day window before the next storm comes. And when you go, it's time to go.
Yeah, definitely really a year-round management process, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we do have more intense times than others, but there's always something to be getting going.
Ken, where do you see the industry going as you kind of look down the road? Where do you see the almond business going?
In what regard?
Well, where do you see the market going? Do you see more acres being increased? Do you see the demand continuing to increase globally, I guess, as dietary needs change, as our diets change? I guess, do you see almonds becoming a bigger part of our daily lives?
So high level market supply acreage. This year we do crop forecasts. The most recent crop forecast, there's been 4 of them this year, and they all kind of align around a 2.7 billion pound crop. So this will be about the third year in a row where we have about a 2.7 billion pound crop. And this is the first year where we've seen a reduction in bearing almond acres overall. Those are 2 good things for us as an industry, mm-hmm. because we are finally getting back into equilibrium since we're producing about a 2.7 billion pound crop. Well, we've also shipped about a 2.7 billion pound crop in these same years. And we're seeing trends where bearing acres are decreasing. And we have reason to believe in California that bearing acres are going to continue to increase for several years to come. One of the biggest reasons is SGMA, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Act in California,
yes,
where groundwater pumping restrictions are starting to take hold. And GSAs, groundwater sustainability agencies, and regions, depending on what subbasin you're in, are required to develop and submit GSPs, groundwater sustainability plans, to the state water board to reduce overall groundwater pumping. So that's going to limit the availability of farmable almond acres as a perennial crop. So what I see in the long term is guys that don't have secure surface water deliveries, guys that rely solely on groundwater with large acreage. Let's say they got a 1,000-acre farm. Right now it's, 800 acres of almonds and 200 acres of annual crops. As the older blocks in that 800 acres phase out, they won't go back in. It might be a third of that acreage stay permanent crop. The other 2/3 stays rotational. And on years that they have good water supply from federal water projects or state water projects on supplemental water from the groundwater, they might plant annual crops on all of the open acres and just focus on the perennial acres year in, year out. On years that are tight water, they might not plant any of the annual crop acres and use the water allocation from there to supply a full water supply to the perennial crop.
So definitely water is going to be the driver of the future, at least in California, it sounds like.
Yes.
Continues to be a big challenge, not just in California, but across much of the West. And we're always looking for solutions in that area for sure.
Yeah.
Ken, I want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink as we become more almond-wise, learning more about almonds, how they're grown and how they're marketed, not just domestically, but around the world. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Thank you, Bill.
And welcome back to FieldLink. Joining us from Nashville is Jody Lawrence. Jody, welcome back to FieldLink today.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be back as we have now easily turned the page on June, and crops are almost all but in the ground, and probably down in the last 2 or 3% for corn and beans, and everything for the most part off to a pretty good start, and the weather looks good. So when we say that in mid-June, it's always a good news, bad news scenario to say it.
It is good news to hear that, even getting some rain down in the southwest part of the country. I know West Texas and New Mexico getting a little bit of moisture from my understanding. So it is starting to spread across the country, and then certainly needed in a lot of places, definitely needed in the high plains. I like to see a little more action there. But overall, across most of the Corn Belt and into the East Coast, we're having pretty good moisture.
You look at the drought monitor map, and it is certainly shrinking in the driest parts of the area. But one of the more important things that you don't think about when we talk about rain and drought monitor is that the wettest areas during the spring in April and early May of kind of the southern eastern Corn Belt, the lower Ohio Valley, have dried out, and their crops really have gotten off to. Talked to several farmers in those areas today. They look better than they expected with all the rain that came early and the cool weather. So, I would say we've got a crop condition report that will come out here in just a minute. But my suspicion is that crop ratings for corn and beans improved a little bit last week. But while that's always kind of a good yardstick to think about, you got to take it with a grain of salt this early, because there's just so much time left, and there's very little correlation between what the crop ratings say, the first couple weeks and where we end up in the final numbers in September and then all the way into January.
Well, good weather is certainly one key bullet point that we're going to talk about today on this podcast as it relates to the markets. The weather, it's, not helping or necessarily hurting the grain markets, is it, Jody?
No, and that was part of it, because now that when this comes out, everybody will have unfortunately gone through the last couple weeks of really just a complete avalanche of price, as everyone, including the funds, which is really the biggest culprit in this, why the markets seem to be trading so violently more recently, but since they have been allowed to expand their positions, is you look back, the Chinese trade meeting was in mid-May, the announcement made for the additional potential sales after the $25 billion one we thought going in. Everybody was like, okay, China is here at the doorstep, ready to start filling boats, and China hasn't done anything. They have not lowered a tariff tax, whatever you want to call it, 10% on importing U.S. grain and other ag, beans, wheat, and such, have not lowered it. And that was thought to be one of the things that immediately happened when the meeting was over. And it's just, this is always the piece of it. And what we're looking at now is, okay, we're dealing with Iran and they're not trustworthy. China's never been trustworthy. So when they come up and say, yeah, we're going to end the war and open the straits, like about a month ago, I guess there. And, then China goes, oh, yeah, we're going to come in and buy everything because we love you guys. And neither one of them has happened. And you see the effect that it has on the markets. And it's tough to watch because there are a lot of people trading our markets with a lot more money for different reasons than what the end users and what our farmers and the hedgers and everybody involved in it, the cattle feed and everybody else. So it's very frustrating. We were probably lucky that new crop corn got over $5 and November beans over 12. And now we can see when they decided they, didn't want to be in any longer, how important they are, our long-term movement and certainly the daily volatility.
Yeah, definitely. Right now the markets seem overall pretty flat, just kind of hanging out for the most part.
We're right back where we started. We're up against some of the early year lows. And, in the course of 3 weeks, we made new 2026 highs and new 2026 lows. So it's hard to figure out fair value. If you are either realistic or a pessimist, you can go one route and say, well, China was just lying and they're not going to buy anything. And if they don't buy anything, then it's all going to be about U.S. weather. And U.S. weather right now is non-threatening. We don't know the impact of what the high fertilizer prices are going to be on additional crop treatments, side dressing, and things like that as we move into the season. But when you look at the temperatures and you look at the rain coverage, U.S. weather leans bearish, and it's hard to start a rally in June when you have good U.S. weather.
And oil, it's also doing the seesaw thing, up and down a little bit based on the latest action over, obviously, in Iran. Today we've got blockades going. We've had some action as we're recording this over the night with Israel taking some action on some positions there. We have a lot going on still in Iran.
This weekend, and then the market reaction, so you kind of have to separate the two things. Israel fired on southern Lebanon and Hezbollah, and then Iran fired back at Israel for attacking kind of their terrorist outpost. But then the markets didn't react. You had equity markets back up sharply, really on completely independent after some stuff last week. And crude oil at one point was up $3 and at one point was trading lower. And right now is only up 85 cents. So they said a ceasefire was agreed to between Israel and Iran, but that's just as good as the next rumor or tweet. So, but with crude oil trading, basically $90 to $95, the inflation trade that became such a topic of conversation during the rally, well, crude's going to go to 150, and it still could. I'm not saying that whoever said that was wrong, but if you start to take out bullish legs of the stool, high, $100 plus crude and high gas prices and China demand, it does become tough to try to sustain those prices where we got, a month ago.
Yeah, definitely continues to be a lot of volatility and action. They're driving that oil price up and down every day. And obviously that's impacting some of these decisions that China's making, which obviously is impacting the commodity markets across the U.S.
And there's one thing I do want to add to that, because I don't want everybody just to turn it off and send me, and this weekend when everybody starts listening, send me angry emails, calls, and letters about how bearish I am. What we know and have always known about China is they're really smart buyers, and they got their break. If they are looking for a Groupon Kmart Blue Light special sale on corn and beans, they got it, because we sure have taken a lot of price off in the last week and a half. And this could be a spot where in the daily sales reports, these are going to be very important. If we see China show up as a buyer, a specific buyer of a couple cargoes of corn, which is, roughly 2 million metric tons is 80 million bushels, and then about the same for beans, then hopefully you've got some traction under the tires that they found a price point that they want to start following through on whatever trade deal they agreed to a month ago.
Still more to come as things evolve in the Middle East, impacting really the entire global market. Jody, I want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink. Folks, you can learn more from Jody on his daily emails through the FieldLink Market Report. Be sure to go to helenaagri.com and sign up for the FieldLink Market Report. And be sure to click on that box to get your SMS texting. So when the markets do move, you're in a position to take action. Thanks for joining us, Jody.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Make plans to join us in Memphis, Tennessee for the Innovation Expo, brought to you by the Helena Products Group on July 9th. Contact your Helena representative to learn more.